Now I prepared another dummy application for you. Of course you find it attached. It has two dummy movies which are being rendered here, and this button which currently doesn't do anything. Now the code for this is fairly straightforward. It's an app component which renders a section with this button and which then renders a movies list component. And currently I just have some dummy movie data which is fed into the movies list. And in the movies list, I simply loop through these movies to output the individual movie components, which render list items with, well, this content. And that brings this here to the screen. Now, at this point in this application, as I said, we're just using some dummy data here. I want to change this now. I want to fetch data from a database which contains some example movies. And for that, I'll use the Star Wars API. You can visit swappy.dev for Star Wars API. And here you have a little dummy API with some dummy data which you can send requests to play around with it, basically. Now, I will say right away, this is an API. It's a backend app. It's not a database because of what I explained in the last section. Behind the scenes, it of course probably uses some database to store some data about the Star Wars movies, but we interact with this backend app. And I said API a couple of times. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's a very broad term, not just related to React and HTTP requests. In the end, it means that in our code, we're dealing with something which has a clearly defined interface, clearly defined rules on how we can achieve certain results and do certain tasks. And when we talk about APIs in the context of HTTP requests, we typically talk about REST or GraphQL APIs, which are basically two different standards for how a server should expose its data. Now, this is a REST API, and it simply means that there are a couple of URLs, like this URL, which you see here, to which you send a request to get back data in a certain format. And different URLs to which you send different requests will give you different chunks of data. That's what makes it an API. You got different entry points which lead to different results. If you want to learn more about REST APIs and what exactly that all is, you'll also find a helpful resource on that attached to this lecture. So here we can basically send a request to this URL, for example, to get information about a certain person from the Star Wars movies. We can also grab this URL here and send a request to swappy.dev/API/films, and we will later get back a response with a bunch of objects describing the different films, the different Star Wars movies, with, for example, the opening crawl text and the title, the episode ID, and so on. Now, this is just a dummy API, which I want to use for getting started with sending HTTP requests. That's why I'm having a look at this first. And this is the API to which we now want to send requests from inside our React application here to populate this list of movies here with some real data instead of our dummy data. And how does this now work in React?